There's just like an incredibly rich history of solidarity and connections between revolutionary movements in Africa and the Black liberation struggle in the United States. And what I wanted to kind of end the show with is how much of that anti-colonial struggle that we've spoken about today in Africa and beyond that we've been talking about, how much is that reflected in the discourse in the United States? And are there any signs of a renewed internationalism within the movements in the US today, and specifically in regards to the Black Lives Matter movement in the US, which has unfortunately subsided in recent years? There's been many parts of that movement that have sadly been co-opted by the neoliberal agenda. So do you think there's any potential for a revival here and for a new internationalism, which is linked up with this global majority and the anti-imperialist, anti-colonial struggles that are happening across the world?
Short answer, yes, definitely. I mean, the mass movement for Palestine and solidarity with Palestine here in the United States, I think is the perfect example of that. And it's a good relationship because, really the mainstreaming, at least amongst progressive people, of Palestine as an issue, because even amongst many progressive people didn't want to touch Palestine for many years, is due to the movement for Black lives, because the long history between the African American population and the Palestinian community, not just here, but internationally, and the solidarity between the two is palpable. And the Palestinians coming online during Ferguson and telling people how to walk through the tear gas and how to fight on the streets because they're having the same police tactics, same tear gas, same thing, IDF, the Israeli police, US police working together, really renewed that link. And so you couldn't really be for quote unquote Black Lives Matter without being for Palestine. And it actually became kind of a crisis for a lot of liberal Zionist organizations in America that, certainly the people are against racism, but they found themselves in trouble because people were like, well, you can't speak here because you're not for Palestine. And so ultimately that created a strong basis for making Palestine a key breakpoint issue for progressives and really pushing forward majorly the politics of Palestine in ways that laid the basis for, I think, what we saw after October 7th and the huge number of people coming out. And I think that level of internationalism is big and enduring. And like I said, is rooted in these sort of deep historical solidarities that I think, will continue and move forward. Now that being said, outside of Palestine, there's still a lot of contradictions that are there. In some ways, it's sort of a paradox because the sort of high tide of street protest movements in America that really crested in 2020, like from 2014 when Ferguson happened, really 2012 maybe if you want to say from Occupy, to 2020, you had Occupy, you have Ferguson, Baltimore, Standing Rock, like you had so many different things, the People's Climate Marches with 1 million people that just kept happening over and over again. 2020, the uprising against racism, maybe the largest protest in the history. A lot of that has faded to some degree in terms of it being in the streets. As you mentioned, most of it has been co-opted. I mean, we have to do a whole other show on that. But as they say, the ruling class learns, like in the same way they got rid of the draft and made it an all volunteer military, so-called volunteer, because they recognized the draft was a political liability, the ability to co-opt mass movements through non-governmental organizations funded by billionaire trust fund people who claim to be liberal but are billionaire trust fund people, so we know it's behind them, massively effective. It's actually amazing how effective it was at counterinsurgency. So that all happened. But the good part about that is sort of underneath that, and the undercurrent is it actually has created this cycle of radical upsurge, a significantly larger of consciously radical people. So like, for instance, the Party for Socialism and Liberation candidates for president this year, Claudia de la Cruz and Karina Garcia, who are open communists, got the highest vote for communist since the 1930s. Number of votes, percentage of the vote, tied with other areas like the 1930s, in the middle of the 1970s, where there were radical upsurges. And a lot of, it's like, where the history of America, people say, yeah, communism. A lot of people were for that then, 30s. 70s, 60s, 70s. Anyway, long story short, so showing that the growth of people with a lot of consciousness making conscious votes for very radical ideologies was there. You had the poll in the New York Times saying 69% of people in the country wanted the US economy to either be massively transformed or totally torn down. And that was getting up into like 80% when we were talking about the African American population that existing in the globe. You've got groups like DSA, certainly sort of a softer, more social democratic politics than say the PSL that I just mentioned, not communist politics, but still openly socialist politics with tens of thousands of members, getting people elected to city councils and things like that. The revival of the labor movement has really kind of followed on this because a lot of more radical young people are in these jobs and they want to fight. Like I interviewed someone from the Kellogg's, the cereal, they were striking like a couple years ago. And I said to the guy, the head of the union, like, why are you doing this? He said, we're doing this for our young people. Like they want what we have. They want a good job. They want that. And like they are driving this. And those young people are like some of the same people who are showing up, not some, a lot of them are the same. Starbucks workers who are organizing in America on, I think like October 13th, had out a solidarity statement with the Palestinian people, like they were moving fast. So we're seeing these things come in train. So there's a growing radicalization. I mean, my own back of the envelope calculation is there's about 15 million people in America that consider themselves some form of socialist or communist. So I say all that to say that the kindling, if you will, is definitely there. So now the question is how do you start the fire? And some of that is different struggle. But to go to the point you're really asking about internationalism, this is one of the key points because Palestine, I think most progressive people are with it. I mean, even like most people who voted for Kamala Harris, and I'm not saying this is right, and I know a lot of people who are Democrats, they were not in favor of the genocide. And they made their own choices. I wish people would have made different choices, but it wasn't like people were like, we don't care at all about Palestinians. It was more like lesser of two evils, we're going to hold our nose. But a lot of people were for Palestine and felt that this was totally wrong and it needed to change. So like I think we've made a huge progress in helping people understand what's going on. But on China, not as much progress. The level of demonization against China and Chinese people, and the United States of America has a lot of Chinese American people here. So this has also been bound up in a big kind of racist campaign that all Chinese people or people perceived to be Chinese, because again, America is so racist. You could be Korean, you could be Filipino, you could be from whatever. Like that, people don't care. Like people are just like Chinese, So all Asians, East Asians, many Southeast Asians, are subject to a lot of racism, a lot of things happening. Are they spies? Are they this? Are they that? That is happening at the same time. And a lot of that has sadly, worked. And you have a lot of the trade union movement is very against China, playing into the worst possible things. Russiagate, which happened after Hillary Clinton lost. The reality is most people in America do really think like China is against us, that there's something evil about China. They're trying to do something to America. Russia, kind of something evil about them. Iran. I think there are a lot of people who don't want to go to war with these countries and are very open to the idea of more collaboration as opposed to confrontation. But even if they sort of say like, yeah, I would love to see us collaborate more with China on climate change, they still might have in their mind, like China, though, is still kind of our competitor. And even a lot of people I talk to who are like, yes, we need to not have a new Cold War, will be like, we need to have a competition. And I'm like, well, why are we having a competition? Like, if we have the same global challenges, why don't we have cooperation? I do think we can break through it. I think Palestine is a good example of that because there is no Zionist propaganda in America, the level of strength that has had. I'm just 38 over the course of my life. To see where it is now to where it was is unbelievable to me. And to see the number of people who don't believe the Zionist lies anymore is shocking. If you told me 5 years ago this would be the case, I would have been like, put the drink down. Like, that can't happen. So I think on China, on Russia, on Iran, on other countries, it's possible. And I think that we are seeing now that things like the TikTok ban is opening up people's minds. Now, no one foresaw that. I did not foresee this. But, TikTok, people are not only enjoy the app, but a lot of people are making money off TikTok. This is their business. This is everything. So the existential fact of losing TikTok, millions of people were like, something about this confrontation we have with China is not right. And now people are seeing the videos. People are learning Mandarin and they're getting on the little red book. I know people are calling it red note, but I heard the actual translation is little red book. And I like that for obvious reasons. And, having these exchanges with people and all these different pieces. So, that was like unexpected, but it's taken a larger subset of the population that probably wasn't even thinking a lot about China or international affairs and now put them in the camp of being much more critical, questioning the consensus. And I think if we can walk people through this, it's not about, you don't have to say, I agree with everything of the Chinese Communist Party or the Iranian leadership or Russia. You can say you disagree with almost 99% of what they're saying. But the real question is it helping us or is it hurting us as average everyday working people to like go to war, to sanction, to blockade these people? Or does it make more sense to try to work together around our shared global concerns that are really affecting us? And I think we can make progress, but I won't lie to you, it's an uphill climb because the level of propaganda is so huge that it's not going to be easy. But I think it can be done. If it can be done on Palestine, I think it can be done on all the other issues, but we're going to have to push back. We're going to have to fight back. And my hope in the US, especially around China, is so much of the anti-China crusade is so racist that many people in the United States, tens of millions of people, are very against racism in this country. Even though it's a very racist country at its core, there are so many anti-racist people in this country. And I think if people start to see that, like the demonization that's happening against Asian people in this country in relationship to this, that will also become a major point of struggle, that we can help people open their eyes about what this is really about. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful, but a lot of challenges along the way.